set.
We're starting
Let's be.
for me. Mr. Devine?
Good evening and welcome to the April 27th Civil Service Commission meeting. And we have roll call, please.
Commissioner Hatamian? Gantis?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Devine?
Yes.
And for the record, Commissioner Manukian is absent.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the minutes. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Second.
Oh, no, he's asking for a motion. May I inquire, Mr. Chairman, did you read these minutes?
I did.
And is there anything I need to concern myself with before I make the motion for approval?
I don't know.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Hatamian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Devine?
Yes. Okay, what's next, please?
Oral communications.
I have no cards, so we'll move on to the next item.
Well, you need to, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, you do need to open up to the audience if anybody wishes to address the commission that hasn't given a card.
Thank you. Is there anyone that wishes to address the commission that has not submitted a card?
On something other than what's on the agenda.
Seeing none, we'll go to the next item.
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the item before you are a list of the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. As you can see, we have 4 lists that have been established. They're all promotional. Typically, when we see the open recruitments, we see very high numbers these days, but you see varying numbers, 2 applications for one for another, 20 and 10. The column on the far right, of course, is the final number of people who made it through the applicable recruitment process and whose name ultimately appears on the list for consideration. So with that, this is a note and file item. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none. Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, Chief Assistant General Manager.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a class specification for a newly created classification. This is a Chief Assistant General Manager for the Water and Power Department. This position is will be a single assistant department head for the Water and Power Department. We currently have 5 assistant general managers who currently report to the general manager, and what we'll be doing is reallocating one of those 5 into this position. This position will be, again, the number 2 in the department, and really the focus will be on a lot of far-reaching type initiatives, the biggest right now being smart grid, a lot of the power energy purchases, power supply, renewable energy projects, and things along those lines. This, again, is a position we hope to fill on a promotional basis, and again, as a budgetary reallocation, we're not increasing the number of positions, just shifting them around from one AGM to a chief AGM. So with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you may have. I also want to introduce Mr. Glenn Steiger, who's here. He's the General Manager for Water and Power. If you have any further questions, there is an organization chart attached as well. If you want to get a general sense of sort of the before and after of this transaction. So with that, leave it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gantis?
Mr. Doyle, I've never made it a secret of my disdain for creating levels of things, but we do not have an assistant. We don't have an assistant, a single assistant to Mr. Steiger, is that correct?
Currently, no.
And that's what this is going to do.
That is correct.
And before we do this, is this then included in any kind of a budgetary thing that's been approved, or we're just creating this and then going to the City Council and seeing where they go with it?
Commissioner Gantis, actually, it's a bit backwards. We had the City Council approve of the establishment of this classification. It went to City Council maybe about a month ago, and they gave it their approval. At this point, we're simply seeking your approval of the specification and the essential functions, minimum requirements, and such.
And why do we need a chief assistant general manager over 4 other assistant general managers? Because they're all different, one's electric, one's water, one's power, one's utility, financial planning. I mean, they're all Why do we need to have one chief assistant?
Mr. Gantis, I'll probably have Mr. Steiger address the need, as he's most familiar with the operation of the department.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. President, members of the Commission, let me address this. I'll give you a little bit of an overview to put it more in perspective. When I first came to GWP a little over 3 years ago, we had, in fact, a position similar to this, which was more or less second in command in GWP. I basically, at that point in time, eliminated it and reallocated it to one of the 5 assistant general manager positions, recognizing that at that time I needed to get a much better feel for the organization, for the issues, and so on. During the last 3 years, we've had a number of major issues that have now created the need for a position such as this that will take a much broader view than any one of the individual AGMs currently would have, be responsible for 2 of our largest and most risky areas, and that is our Smart Grid project, which is a $70 million project ongoing that touches every other part of the organization. So the Smart Grid is not just part of electric or part of water or part of IT. It touches everything. Therefore, we need a business strategist and an operational strategist that will oversee all the functions that go to all the different areas of GWP. In addition, this position continues to have full responsibility for all of our energy trading and contracting. We currently do about $150 million a year in energy trading. So between the $150 million and again the $70 million in Smart Grid, it's well over $200 million worth of responsibility in a fairly risky and in some cases highly volatile area. Beyond that, the technologies that we're dealing with today continue to escalate at an exponential level. We need someone that can look from a business standpoint in the long term to determine what technologies are going to be the right application for GWP, whether it's water, whether it's electric, and more, we're literally combining these functions. So in the case of Smart Grid, for example, Smart Grid actually combines electric and water applications. It's the first time we've ever done that. We'll be doing much more than that. Our business is changing. It's transitioning to a much more technological type of operation. So this particular position, in my opinion, is very necessary for the ongoing operation of GWP.
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Doyle knows this, Mr. Steiger, you may not know this, I always vote against creating levels of, because I consider it bureaucracy. This is the singularly most eloquent defense of a position that I have heard, and I'm going to vote for it because I agree with you. You've adequately convinced me. And that's hard to do because I really don't like to vote for these, but I'm going to.
Thank you.
I do have a question for Mr. Doyle regarding this position. This being a new classification, and also given the importance that you just shared with us regarding this position and its power and authority, how did DHR or your team come up with the minimum requirements regarding this position?
Commissioner Hatamian, it's a very good question.
Excellent question.
We looked at the collective assistant general manager classifications, and they're very similar to what we have here, and simply embellished those as far as essential functions, minimum requirements, and made it a bit of a higher level than what's included within the assistant general manager. And of course, again, a very, very strong focus on all of the initiatives that Mr. Steiger addressed that this person would be focused upon.
So basically, the blueprint that you and your team used regarding the minimum requirements were just based on current and previous assistant general manager positions.
That's correct. That was the starting point, and then we had some brief.
Is that also reflective upon the education and training
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Yes. Mr. Steiger, I have experience in GWP for 7-8 years. My problem is this education. because we need $150 million, $50 million, $70 million. It's not a joke. If we make a mistake, we are going to go down.
Right.
So we need somebody over there that knows what he's doing, especially has a vision for the future. Your priority is smart grids. My priority was our turbine, for example. So we need somebody that over there has this knowledge and vision and that we can see and implement, especially now that we are going through the financial problem city of Glendale. And we are short 18 million, 20 million or something. So somehow the buck has to stop someplace. The only cow that can give us some milk is GWP, as far as I know.
Not anymore.
So, well, this is my, this is the way which I think, I'm sorry. So now I'm thinking that we have to increase this qualification training or something. Master degree in engineering, it has to be important because whenever we're dealing with GE company to bring the turbine over there, we are talking about 120, 100 to 150, $180 million turbine. It's going to take 2 to 3, 5 years or 4 years to have implement those turbines over there. And on top of that, many other things over there, which is very important in our city. So I would like to see somebody who's qualified with some engineering degrees over there, some business from qualified universities, not profitable universities. So I would like to see that it's going to implement that one, and your decision is going to be based somebody who's going to run for the city, because let's put it this way, God forbid something happened to you. For example, this is the way which I look at it. Second in command can come over there and take care of everything else. So that's basically my idea towards this. And I believe in that. I'm second to Mr. Gantes that, yes, definitely we need somebody second in command over there.
I do have 3 quick questions. One is an academic question, and the other are just for the staffing here. Will you be going outside for recruitment for this position?
We are looking at a promotional recruitment internally for this.
Oh,
And Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, because it is literally a budgetary reallocation, we're trading one existing position for another. If we were to go to the outside and bring somebody in new, then that would leave us with essentially somebody would be out of a job. So we need to work with what we have internally to fill this position.
and will there be an exam process then to fill the position, or will this be an automatic promotion for somebody?
There is no
Chair, there are no
promotions.
automatic promotions in a civil service system. We will post an employment bulletin for this position, and all who meet these minimum requirements will be invited to apply. And then at that point, we'll take a look at what process needs to be done. But I anticipate at minimum rather extensive interview process for the candidates.
And the last question, is this a line or a staff position? When I look at the org chart, it shows it as a staff with a dotted line. I mean, as a staff with a dotted line over to the line. So I guess the main question is, do these 4 assistant general managers report through the chief assistant general manager to the general manager, or is there no span of control for the chief assistant general manager?
That's a good question. The chief assistant general manager will have a full staff under him or her related to power supply, smart grid, business risk assessment, and so on, which is not shown on that chart. The other assistant general managers will not report directly to that person, but there's a dotted line relationship to every one of them. It's a matrix organization, so there will be some oversight from the chief assistant to the other AGMs, but the solid line direct reporting relationship of all the AGMs is directly to the general manager, to myself.
All right, then in the absence of the general manager, this person would be in charge of the department?
Yes.
Then? Is that correct?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Move to approve.
I do have one last clarifying question for Mr. Doyle prior to approval. So this examination, if it's approved at some point, is it going to be open to the public, or is it just going to be internal?
Mr. Hitami, it will be internal, and we'll call it a promotional examination, and it'll be up. The bulletin will be posted for the required 2-week period.
And may I ask the rationale behind it being internal again? Once again, is it just a fiscal issue or?
Commissioner Tamian, it's both. It's a fiscal issue and truly the belief that we feel that there are sufficient number of internal candidates eligible for this position. From a succession planning standpoint, it would provide the opportunity for again, any one of these assistant general managers to get a feel for the number 2 position. And should Mr. Steiger retire in the next few years, it would possibly prepare somebody for his job.
And Mr. Steiger, just one final question. Have you had an opportunity to review the minimum requirements in this posting, and how do you feel about the minimum requirements regarding this classification?
I have reviewed them, and I am satisfied with them. I do, these are minimum requirements. We're looking for more than that. I would agree that we need somewhat of a visionary with a strong business background. So I'm in agreement with what I've heard, yes. But I have reviewed them.
And I believe we've had a motion and a second, so...
No, I have a question.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Mr. Doyle? So according to the statement or your statement, my understanding is, so one of these 5s is going to be eventually be promoted to that position. Is that correct?
It's the hope.
Because we are not going to go outside.
That is correct.
We are not going to hire
It
any
is anticipated.
headhunter.
Theoretically, anyone within the city who meets these qualifications, even beyond the 5 assistant general managers, could apply. But more than likely, we would anticipate the pool of eligibles to come from that group.
And is going to be any kind of a panel or examination group, or some people just Mr. Chief, Steiger, he is the only person who's going to interview these and hire the position?
We'll look
Hire that person?
Commissioner Gregorian, we'll look at the number of applicants we get and determination of what type of a process, but we would anticipate some form of panel interview on a promotional process such as this. We would try to get individuals from outside the organization to do a purely objective analysis of these candidates and their qualifications.
And that after is going to come to this commission, the name, or just going to go?
No.
Okay. We don't hire and fire.
No, not as a information only, just nothing. Okay.
Okay, can we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Hatamian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes?
Gregorian?
Yes.
Devine?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Stein.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, may we have the next item, please?
Report on advertising budget expenditures, January 2011 to March 2011.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a report on our advertising expenditures. We do this on a quarterly basis to reflect the expenditures that the Human Resources Department takes on recruitment costs, and primarily in the area of advertising. This report addresses the previous quarter, and this would be the third quarter of the 10-11 fiscal year, going from January 1st, 2011 to March 31st, 2011. It reflects an expenditure of approximately $10,000 in this quarter. As you can see from the report, the total advertising budget for the entire fiscal year is $40,300. We had not spent very much in the months following the start of the fiscal year, but for just a variety of factors, we did have somewhat heavy recruitment activity in the third quarter of this fiscal year. So during this time period, we did do a lot of advertising. This report is broken into 3 areas primarily of our expenditures. The Section A relates to journals, publications, and websites that deal with primarily with various ethnic groups and ethnic communities. Section B deals with primarily trade-type journals and specialized journals that deal with a specific type of occupation. And then Section C deals with publications of general interest, including newspapers, Glendale News Press, some of the websites such as Craigslist and governmentjobs.com and Jobs Available, those types of things. So the expenditures are broken down by the various positions that are advertised on your report. Another thing we did in this particular report, we wanted to give you a general sense of where we send our employment bulletins out. There are approximately 80 contacts that we have of other organizations, nonprofits, job centers, places like that we send our job announcements to, and it's all done by email now. In the old days, we used to put a stamp on them and send them in the U.S. mail, but now we email those. In addition, we do send all of our job announcements over to the Verdugo Job Center here in Glendale, and they in turn have a whole group of various distributions that they have for our employment bulletins. So we do get pretty widespread exposure and on our employment jobs. Probably in our next report, we'll give you sort of the breakdown, sort of the end of the year, where we've seen most of our applicants coming from, and sort of collectively what has been the most effective areas to advertise. I anticipate once again finding that our website would continue to be our major source of potential applicants for jobs. Our website is probably the most heavily visited section of our website is that having to do with job announcements and job openings. So even more so than city council agendas and things like that. So it's a very popular method of getting the word out. With that, I can answer any questions you may have. There's a lot of information here. I do want to recognize Narine Kasparian. She's a member of our staff who compiles this information. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions? I just have one. Is your advertising budget in danger of being cut back pursuant to the current budget discussions? Or have you offered up any portion of it as part of a budget reduction?
Mr. Chair, it is possibly in danger, and we can certainly cut back further. But and I'll put this in a little perspective. We've been cutting it back for years now, ever since the advent of internet advertising. We've really not had to do as much advertising in print publications, which tended to be very, very expensive. Back when I first started with the City of Glendale 20 years ago, we would try to get our biggest exposure by running ads in the Sunday LA Times, and those ads would run from anywhere from about $1,000 to $1,500 a pop. So at that time, we had an advertising budget of close to $150,000 to $200,000. We've scaled that way back. It's, most of the advertising done over the internet is either very low cost or free. And we've been very diligent in how we spend these advertising dollars. Like I said, we've gone down from about $150,000 to about $100,000, and it was around $75,000. And last few years, it's been in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. Now we're down to about $40,000, and if push came to shove, we could probably cut it even further. But this particular quarter we were in ended up having quite a bit of activity, and I wouldn't anticipate that pattern of recruitment continuing for the next few months or even into the next fiscal year. So this quarter, I would say, is a bit of an anomaly. If you look at the year-to-date expenditure on this, it's a total of $15,000. So that means we spent, I think it was $10,000 in this quarter, and only about $5,000 in the previous two quarters. So we're on track to be well under our allotted $40,000.
Thank you. Can we have the next item, please?
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your agenda forecast. We, as you know, there are some disciplinary appeal hearings, taking up a good amount of your time. As far as the open civil service meetings, we will continue to bring class specifications, job bulletins, and other routine issues before you. May 11th, we are anticipating a brief report on minor modifications to class specifications that we'll be working on. Other than that, there's nothing really major planned for the next few months, other than those hearings, of course.
Okay, any questions on the agenda forecast? The next item, please.
Reports and information.
Mr. Chair, I wish to make just two announcements. You have in your packet the motion. There's two motions recognizing appointments that have been made within the city attorney's office of two individuals. And appointments may or may not be the right term, but these essentially amount to promotions for two individual members of the city attorney's staff. One being the promotion of Ann Maurer to general counsel for the litigation section of the city attorney's office. Her previous position was a senior assistant city attorney. And then the second one is for the appointment of Doreen Martirosyan to the level of assistant city attorney for water and power. Both of these individuals are experienced legal professionals, and I wanted to notify the Commission as per the requirement of both the Charter and the Civil Service Rules. These appointments were made under the provisions of both the Charter and Civil Service Rules. The City Attorney does have the authority to make direct appointments of his or her assistants and deputies, and it is required that we then notify the Civil Service Commission of said appointments. So that's what I wanted to address.
Any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the next item, please.
Mr. Chair, I have one other item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do want to call your attention to the newly revised Civil Service Rules that we've recently published. These were, in fact, adopted by the Commission. I believe it was October, November last year. We brought it to City Council in March, and they approved these revised rules unanimously. And I once again want to thank the Commission for all of their assistance and really great input in putting this together. And I just wanted to point out the new document, and you can get rid of your old one. Mine has seen better days, so I think happy to have a nice, clean version of updated Civil Service Rules.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item.
Civil Service Commission and our staff comments.
Do any of the commissioners have any comments? Staff have any comments?
Thankfully.
None? Next.
Closed session.
Okay, we have three items under closed session. We will be adjourning now into closed session. I was wondering, at this point, is it necessary to report out of closed session on this?
No.
No? So we can adjourn the meeting at this point?
No, we don't adjourn the meeting until after the closed session, but we won't be reporting out. We'll be off TV in any event.
Okay. So that concludes the meeting, and we are adjourning into closed session at this point.